We are recording today on Thursday, September 11th, 2025. So obviously the big news yesterday was about Charlie Kirk. I'm sure we all have lots to talk about with regards to that story, but it is also the anniversary of September 11th. So I guess I would just ask, do you guys remember where you were on September 11th, 2001?
I do. I was a young child, and I was at my babysitter, Renine, who I called Auntie Renine, but certainly no relation. She was just my best friend's mom, who babysat me, and we used to play hockey together. Me and that guy. We didn't even play on a team together. We just played street hockey all day when I was at her house.
Walid,
I think I was somewhere in the embryo process. I was born in 02, so I don't have much memory of the event myself, but certainly the post 2001 world has been the world I've only ever known. So definitely, I take 9/11 with a very keen interest, depending on exactly what we're discussing. The event themselves, the precursor, and of course the post geopolitical reality with how we got engaged in the Middle East and how air travel and just governments have really grown, and everything's changed since that specific point in time. It's a really consequential event for sure.
do you remember where you were when you first learned about 9/11?
I think, to be fair with me, I may have heard of 9/11 multiple times throughout my childhood without giving it much attention. But when I was growing up, I actually would frequent New York actually because I had family living there, and I spent some time living there myself as well. So I think when I spent some time in New York as a child around 2008, 2009, I really grasped the reality and grasped the history when I would sit down at home and I would just watch ABC News Live commercial break, and I would see all these commercials about law firms looking for former 9/11 survivors or firefighters from that were there that day that have cancer, lung cancer, other damages, and of course trying to get something out of that. I think it's something along the lines of a memorial fund that is out there provided by the government for these victims. So I could understand what a world after 9/11 for New Yorkers meant. Obviously, there were people that had lost family members and people that had experienced some very traumatic events on that day. But again, they're still living with the consequences in terms of families being apart, people dealing with health consequences. I mean, just all the smoke, all the debris, that itself was, had a massive effect on public health. So, when you're in New York, especially during that time, it's only a few years after, I was around 2009. So you definitely embrace the reality and the fact and the history there. I've also visited the memorial multiple times. It's very beautiful, actually. The Freedom Tower and everything else, and the museum. It's a very important part of history to understand for sure, but not without its controversy and its fair share of conspiracy as well.
Yeah, do you guys think we'll be around the campfire in 15 years talking about where we were for the Charlie Kirk assassination? Similarly? Anyways, that'll be our first story we'll be discussing today. My name's Isaac Lamoureux. I'm here with my colleagues Alex Zoltan and Walid Tamtam. Let's hop right into things. Yeah, so obviously, I don't know about you guys, but still reeling a bit from the news yesterday. As you mentioned, Alex, we are recording this on Thursday, so just note that anything we say today is subject to change based on whenever we might end up publishing this. But obviously, Charlie Kirk was brutally assassinated yesterday while doing one of his famous prove me wrong campus debates out of nowhere there, and that kind of, similarly to 9/11, which we were just discussing, ground the world to a halt, at least from a media perspective. I don't know if it was like that for normal people as it would have been with 9/11, but I mean, just so much to talk about with this story and the few details we know. I mean, for example, the FBI, they had someone in custody, but now they don't. And in fact, the FBI is offering a $100,000 USD reward to anyone who gives them any information that could lead to not any information, but information that leads to the identification or apprehension of the suspect. So $100,000, I mean, and the fact that this person got away is just unbelievable, really. I mean, we don't know the exact details of the security that Kirk might have had at his events. It's not like there was 100 FBI members there and this guy just escaped. But as far as we know right now, he was 200 feet, I think, away on a roof and shot him with some sort of sniper. So obviously this is at least in some fashion a trained shooter, because I don't think a random person off the street could hit someone in the neck from 200 feet or yards away with a sniper. But I'm no gun expert. And then we're also seeing reports that from legitimate sources, that being Stephen Crowder, I think he got an email saying that there were some sort of transgender and anti-fascist etchings on the bullets that they found, because they did recover the gun and some sort of spare cartridges. So I mean, I could go on, but I mean, this is obviously terrible. Charlie Kirk was a huge proponent of the conservative movement, not just in America, but all around the world, especially in Canada and North America. I mean, every conservative spokesperson I know probably saw Kirk as a role model, myself included, and I still see him as in that way. And we know he had a wife and 2 young children, 3 and 1 years old, who are left behind. I mean, I don't even know what to ask you guys. What are your, I guess, immediate reactions? Because we're just still reacting to this right now. Like, what are you guys kind of been going through with this Kirk assassination?
Yeah, I mean, it's horrific. There's really not much more to say than that. I'm kind of speechless. I thought I'd kind of be through processing it already, because like we just have such a quick news cycle these days, but I think I'm still kind of like in a state of shock a little bit, which is strange because, you know, shootings are so common, you know, not just in the United States, but everywhere. Political assassinations are less common, but, you know, even I just learned recently from this story, I guess by extension of this story, that there was a political assassination in Minnesota just like a few months ago, which for some reason never came across my newsfeed. I think a lot of people are just discovering that now.
Yeah, another thing, I don't know about you guys, but obviously I saw the video, and I say I wish I hadn't, but it was almost inevitable. It was everywhere, and people were saying stop sharing the video just out of respect, but it was obviously terrible to see. Yeah, Walid, were you kind of in the same spot where your kind of world just ground to a halt there?
Absolutely. I mean, the reason why you had awkward silence for a moment with Alex and I saying who would answer the question first was, frankly, I think for all of us as journalists, it's a shocking moment, not just because of the graphic and tragic nature of it, but just how, I guess you could say, relatable that environment is for us growing up. I guess all of us have had some sort of a political discourse in our life on college campuses or off college campuses. You know, you talking about the culture war, talking about the things that, you know, Kirk would often talk about on his videos at his live events. So, you know, that environment for us is not an environment that is hard to imagine. You know, this isn't some foreign land with a very different concept. This is what we've gone through growing up. This is how we got to our positions as journalists today, as we engage in civil discourse. We engage with asking questions and answering questions and debating topics, those that we are very passionate about and those that just happen to be on the news. We've been part of the kind of, you could say, the TPUSA culture without, you know, being involved directly with that organization or even in the discourse in the US, but just the culture of left, right, students, just that environment, which I think is very, very important, and that's something that I think Kirk brought a lot of value to, because, you know, a lot of people, and I think this is something that's even happened to him in videos before, would kind of ask him, you know, what do you actually do? I mean, what do you make? How do you make a living? And, you know, what is your job? And Kirk would reply sometimes along the lines of, you know, I come here, I engage on campus, I engage in civil, respectful discourse on the issues that matter the most to me and to our generation. And, you know, obviously talking about political issues and societal issues and, you know, religion and economics as well. You know, I think for a lot of us, we kind of overlook those issues in our day-to-day life. And I think with Kirk and you know, his group and his students that he would lead throughout these sessions for years have brought kind of a heightened sense of awareness for a lot of the people behind the importance of engaging these topics rather than just thinking about them passively and being outspoken, talking about them, not just holding these feelings and thoughts to yourself. So again, when you see this tragic event to happen to this individual, obviously, you know, there's tragedies happening every day, but you're talking about the relationship that we have with that individual and with his purpose, how much we either find inspiration from or we seek guidance from that kind of content. When you're thinking about what I want to write about, what I want to talk about, you're probably on social media because that's the best place to fish for new ideas and understand what the discourse of the day is. And, Kirk was, I think there's not a day where I spend more than 20 minutes on Instagram where I don't see a reel with some background music and subtitles of him talking back and forth with a student. It's been so popular and so much part of our pop culture for sure.
I think that's like, sorry, Isaac, I'm going to jump in here. I think it's one of the things that makes this story so troubling and difficult to digest is that if you go back in time to when Charlie Kirk first started coming across people's Instagram reels, that coincided with a time when left-wing politics really just completely took over university campuses. And so people were really silenced. And so he kind of became a voice for not only like a silent majority, but a silenced majority, where he was brave enough to say a lot of things that people weren't brave enough to say because they wanted to pass their courses, frankly, and appease their leftist university professors. And so I think that's just one of the things that makes this really troubling, difficult to digest.
Yeah, and speaking on that from a Canadian angle, Alex, over the last week or so, I think a poll came out showing that the majority of students on Canadian campuses are scared to share their true beliefs. So, I mean, Charlie Kirk type person in Canada, for example, would be more needed now than ever. But I obviously, we talked about the horrible video, but I also saw a great one yesterday, which was a montage of his clips during the presidential election there, and Kamala Harris supporters were approaching him, and he would just challenge them and say, why do you want to vote for Kamala? For which they had, as you can imagine, little to say. But they'd debate back and forth. He'd present the evidence, and he'd do what he was so good at doing. And then in the end, he'd ask them, who are you voting for now? And they would say, Trump. And it just, he served as such a strong person for the conservative movement. And I did want to ask you guys about that. Obviously, we perhaps no one bigger for the conservative movement in the US, especially on the college campuses, than Charlie Kirk, and how big he is, how worldly he is. But I'm just curious. And I wanted to ask if you think that I was looking for silver linings this morning, and this one came into my mind. For example, Alex, do you think that he could even be bigger than he was after his life now? For example, personally, I'm just thinking about this and how much of an inspiration he serves to me to move the conservative movement forward in Canada. And I know that there are millions like me, or I'm assuming there are millions like me across the world who are going to be inspired for years to come from Kirk and what he accomplished.
Well, yeah, people are typically immortalized when they die young, high-profile people. And so in a sense, whoever did this, whatever individual or persons that did this, has kind of made him a bit of a martyr for the free speech movement. I think that's something that his family can take some solace in, because I think if there's anything worth giving your life over, it's the right to speak freely and for your children to speak freely. So I think that's really brave. And but I just hope that the reaction to this does not create an environment in which people feel afraid to speak, because it's really important, not just for political discourse, but also for each individual's mental health to speak freely and say what's on their mind. So I also would denounce any calls for violence in response to this. I don't think that that's appropriate either, especially when we don't know, as of Thursday, September 11th, 2025, who the shooter is. I think that would be very presumptive and preemptive. People, but I'll reserve judgment, because anger is a very predictable initial step in the grieving process and have people digest traumatic events. So,
and Walid, just looking at right-wing versus left-wing discourse and the kind of political battle going on, not only in the States, but worldwide, do you think that this assassination will change anything in how that goes forward on either side?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that there will be a part of, let's say, the more responsible, mature left, should there be a growth in that demographic, that, let's just be honest, some people have to be a bit more reserved with their commentary. There might be kind of resensible process of people gaining their humanity back, especially those that have opted to demonize those with different views. Because, when you hear the language of Nazis and all kinds of other titles of bigotry, I think there's going to be a lot more room to etch that kind of rhetoric out of the mainstream discourse, at least. I think for the right wing, on the side of which Kirk represented for the most part, I think there will be both good and bad. I mean, like Alex mentioned, and this is also my concern as well, is will there be a chilling effect for people? I don't think the average student as much, but for, let's say, the Kirk's counterparts, other people that would sit down, Michael Knowles, all those other talking heads that have, common,
Steven Crowder, he was doing the exact same.
yeah, people that have common, table side because one of the things I loved actually, and I still love about these kinds of groups, TPUSA and other conservative societies, is that they engaging with people on the street, in public parks, or in college campuses, and that's the physical manifestation of the public forum. That's where someone walking by that has no interest in the issue and someone that happens to finish their class that have prepared the perfect gotcha question, and they're all ready to fire on and represent their side, and you never know how it actually comes off when they hit the mic. So I mean, I don't want to lose that environment, and definitely we lost perhaps one of the pioneers of this political environment, the political campus sandbox. I think we lost one of those pioneers yesterday, and that's obviously very sad. But I do believe there'll be a renewed sense of appreciation, because it's part of human nature to only appreciate or feel grateful for something when it's removed, and this applies to people as well. So I think that a lot of folks will definitely be much more appreciative of the work that is done by college groups, student groups that can push forward their narratives, agendas, causes, and passions through public civil discourse. It's a very important lesson for us, and definitely looking forward to seeing how we can all play a part of that, as journalists, engaging those circles and hearing what the students and folks on the street have to say, because their voices matter, and conversations are, I think, the best way to open up our differences and resolve them if possible.
Yeah, Kirk had a quote along those lines, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember it perfectly, but he basically was saying, when you lose public discourse, what you get is violence. So we certainly can't let this act of violence lead to losing public discourse, because that would only lead to things getting worse, not better. But we could sit on this all day, probably talk for hours. I mean, there's just so much to discuss. But instead, let's talk about guns in Canada, which are having a huge transformation, apparently, because Mark Carney on Wednesday was doing a podcast in Edmonton amid the Liberal retreat with a popular Edmonton podcaster there, and he called the gun ban voluntary. The Liberal gun confiscation program he called voluntary, which, as far as I understand, was the first time that type of language had ever been used, despite this gun ban, of course, being in effect for 5 years now. And then I actually went downtown today, just outside of the Liberal retreat there, and I found Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangaree on the street corner. Went up to him and I asked him about that. So let's play that clip and see what he had to say.
Excuse me, Mr. Anandasangaree, can you just clarify the comments Carney made yesterday about the gun buyback program being voluntary? Are you changing the program?
Well, the program is going to be launched soon.
Is it going to be voluntary now?
It's always been voluntary.
How is that? Can you just clarify those comments? Is it possible? Because all the gun organizations I'm seeing are super confused. They're saying, is it voluntary all of a sudden? Because from what I can tell, the CCFR, for example, they're all saying that it's been mandatory.
Why don't you contact my office and we'll be able to...
You have no comments on that for today?
Yeah, sorry about the the video recording there. I was just trying to get good audio, which I did, which is important. But you might be able to have told how confused I was with his response, which is why I said all I had to say was, how is that? Like, what do you mean it's voluntary, man? For the last 5 years, we've been at the... of course, this is a mandatory thing. You're going to confiscate the guns, or else, per the... public laws, you're going to jail for 5 years for possessing an illegal firearm. So I don't understand how now they're calling it voluntary, because that is a complete change of pace. But hey, Anandasangaree stood by Carney's comments there. Although in the past, Anandasangaree has been called out by actually former True North journalist Andrew Lawton, who's now a Conservative MP, because he was debating him in the House of Commons and came to realize that Anandasangaree did not know basic things about his file, basic things about Canadian gun laws. So it could be that he too is wrong. He said to reach out to his office there, which of course I did, called them, emailed them, no response. So we might have to just wait and see how this develops over the coming weeks. True North kind of breaking this. I mean, Alex, do you think there is a world where this is actually voluntary, or is this just some sort of liberal gaslighting? Like, oh yeah, it's voluntary, but if you do it, you're going to go to jail.
Well, if it was always voluntary, that might explain why they haven't confiscated any guns. This program is, how old is this program? Doesn't it go back?
It's 20. It came from an order in council in 2020, and eventually the list has now grown to over 2,500 firearms being on that ban list, and costs,
Right.
which again, they haven't confiscated any guns, but they're saying costs are expected to be around $2 billion. So a lot of money for no confiscation there.
I remember there was a big controversy with Bill Blair when he was the public safety minister, if my memory serves me correctly, and he was kind of exploiting the tragedy that happened with the mass shooting in Nova Scotia to push through this gun buyback program is what they call it, but it's really a confiscation program. Yeah, you can't really have a voluntary confiscation program. Isn't that just like a paradox? Like, that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, the executive director of the CCFR, Tracy Wilson, she commented a bit on that. But yeah, no, basically, essentially, she said, quote, "It's not a voluntary program or a buyback, as the Liberals in the media have happily called it. It is a confiscation and under threat of imprisonment." And then she said, Carney has the gall to call it an opportunity for licensed law-abiding firearms owners to turn over their legally purchased property. I mean, and furthermore, I do want to go a bit deeper into Carney's comments there, because he said that this doesn't target assault rifles. He said this, he said this exclusively targets assault rifles, which is, of course, not true. Rod Giltaca, the CEO of the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, he said this was just a lie. He said, quote, "There were no assault weapons banned since May 1st, 2020. Every one of these firearms were for hunting or sports shooting. That's why they were legal in the first place, because I'll remind people, all of these guns were legally purchased by Canadians." And he said, Giltaca did, quote, "The lies of these people are outrageous." So, I mean, yeah, Walid, I mean, what's really to say? Do you think that it could be voluntary? I mean, are they just blowing smoke here?
Well, it reminds me of the time that Trudeau was speaking to the media after COVID and talking about, and speaking specifically to the narrative behind the vaccine mandates and the vaccine passports was, no, we never actually forced people. We just locked them out of restaurants, bars, public spaces from being able to work. We've basically taken out all of their purpose to their lives and all of the purpose to their passions, and we've said to them that you can't really do much. Oh, and also we didn't allow them to leave the country in any way possible. So it's a war of deception here. So I don't think this program is by any means optional. It's absolutely coercive by the nature of the laws applied on those specific firearms. But I definitely think this is kind of where they try to, let's say, retract themselves in their approach by adopting a bit more of a lenient rhetoric. Because at the end of the day, they're not speaking to gun owners. They're not even hearing much from gun owners, which is why they've gotten to such a tone-deaf policy, talking about, banning specific firearms, which are often mostly owned legally by well-trained, sophisticated, responsible gun owners that have gone through the most sophisticated hula hoops to get those guns legally acquired, and they get their training course completed, all assigned by the RCMP, while allowing the RCMP to engage their property, observe how they store the weapons and how they operate. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you're not going to be able to deal with crime when you're dealing with law-abiding citizens directly and uniquely. You're dealing with people that want to follow the law, not the people who won't. And that's a very important part. So I definitely think if they're going to make any progress in the public security file as it relates to firearms, which there should be definitely a concern for Canadians. We've seen a rise of gun violence across the country, especially in the GTA area. I think if that's going to change, it's going to come down to the weapon smuggling happening, gun crime from organized criminal groups. And I think Pierre Poilievre spoke about this topic earlier today, discussing a few of those thoughts and ideas. So we might be able to circle back to that topic later on.
Yeah, Goltaka suggested one way they might be framing this as optional, because again, we still have zero details on what that even means. But he said, quote, "I don't believe it will be optional. Maybe they'll say, keep your firearms, don't get paid for them, but you'll have to deactivate them, weld them shut, and therefore make them useless. Not really optional." One thing I just wanted to touch on was Smith, Alberta Premier Daniel Smith recently said, essentially, she's not going to let this happen in the province. She's telling the provincial police forces, the municipal police forces, they cannot participate in this. She said Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe is going down the same line. So, Alex, just wanted to ask you quickly if you think, if the Liberals do proceed with this, do you think other provinces will follow suit and essentially just say, no, we're not doing this, it's our jurisdiction, and people will be good?
I'm not really an expert on the jurisdictional divisions on the issue of gun control. I mean, to some extent, when it comes to municipal policing, there's a third level of government involved. I think that, I hate to bring this back to Charlie Kirk, but I guess it's just, top of mind right now. The thing I find interesting about this news that we have about the voluntary buyback program with regards to the context of the Charlie Kirk thing is I had people call me yesterday who are not even political people to talk to me about the Charlie Kirk thing. I was surprised that they even knew who Charlie Kirk was. And I heard from many people, including actually some folks who are political and on the right, who said, this is one of these weird stories where it actually kind of makes me glad I'm in Canada versus the United States. And so I imagine that at a time like this, across the political spectrum, believe it or not, there's probably more openness to more gun control in Canada than you could probably have at any other time in recent history. But nobody has any confidence that the Liberals can do this effectively. I mean, that's the issue. This is the party that has a gun buyback program that they spent billions of dollars on, and they haven't confiscated a single gun. This is the party that has a dental program that provides no dental care. This is the government that provides a school food program that hasn't produced a single ham sandwich. So even if people were in support of the principle of, reducing gun violence, I mean, that's a great goal. I think we all want to pursue that. Nobody has any confidence that this government can pull it off.
Yeah, Alex, I understand the reaction from an emotional perspective, but realistically, it would do nothing because, as we know, every single jurisdiction, when they're reporting their crime statistics, we're talking about the 90th percentile of guns used in these crimes are illegally smuggled. So banning legally purchased firearms like bolt-action rifles aren't going to do anything.
Well, of
these
course,
people are smuggling them in.
And the vast majority of gun crimes are committed with guns that are not legally owned. So if you really wanted to reduce gun crime, I think the smartest and easiest thing you could do is just increase mandatory minimums for owning an illegal gun.
Maybe, but we could, again, be in this can of worms all day long. Instead, let's shift to a different Alberta story, which Walid actually covered, not me. It might surprise you. But yeah, this is regarding the insurance rate caps. So what was going on there, Walid?
Future reference, Isaac, because I'm looking at Alberta as a future home. I have a flag draped behind me, so I definitely will be covering more Alberta issues going forward, with or without your engagement there. But
we'd welcome you with we'd welcome you with open arms, Walid.
Thank you. You guys have made a fantastic province of yourselves. But on the issue, I talked about the Care First model and pending model that it's coming soon. And the potential reforms and consequences around their new system. I spoke to a Calgary area lawyer, Stephen. Can't get his last name perfect, but it was francophone. He and I spoke. I wanted to get a consumer angle, industry angle to this story. The industry, almost by unanimous consent, is in favor of the government removing the cap on interest rate hikes, essentially, the hike of, I believe it's 5% annually for the general, and then 2.5% for natural disasters and other related elements. So right now, the insurance rate is capped. The increase is capped at 7.5% per year for 15% after 2 years. That's what the government has put in place. Now, if that cap were to be removed, lawyers like Stephen and many other consumers argue that the industry, the insurance industry that is, would go above and beyond in overcharging consumers in Alberta. And of course, there's another consequence of this, that with the Care First model, that you would have a situation where courts, or at least consumers, would no longer be able to go to courts to sue, and would instead be forced to use an industry-funded mechanism to get to claims and compensation apparently much faster. But there's always ethical doubts when you're dealing with a system of refereeing that is funded by the participants themselves, which in this case includes the insurance industry. So a lot of ethical questions around why and how this reform and what kind of consequences it can bring about. I think consumers, for the most part, would be happier if Daniel Smith's government kept the rate hike cap. And of course, for the most, I even saw public polling. The UCP supporters in Alberta are the one among the most critical of the insurance industry. I think it's part of the reason why is because they deal with it. They own properties, they drive cars, multiple cars, and of course that comes with a great expense for sure on the industry side for insurance. But I think her supporters would be very disappointed seeing her go in a direction that would give the industry a leg up over the consumers, where they already have to. I mean, insurance is not a commodity; they must pay for insurance. And as my interviewee said to me as well, if this was not a profitable business model as it exists today, if the insurance bureau was actually honest about the fact that they cannot make a profit out of the current cap, then they would be out of the province already. They would leave for elsewhere. The insurance companies are still around, operating, still making fantastic profits. Unfortunately, with that being said, they are still notoriously known to be a little bit hawkish on consumers. I think last year alone, $3.1 million in Alberta was the total figure of overcharges by insurance companies, at least the ones that were found and accounted for in a report that I had read. So consumers are at odds with the insurance industry, and of course it's up to seeing the future will behold if the UCP lays down more on the side of consumers or on the side of industry. As always, there's a balance to it, but I think for now, consumers are quite concerned with what the future has to hold.
Yeah, Walid, if you're planning to move to Alberta, you should know we are getting gouged, I think, on insurance rates, at least for cars. I think we pay among the highest in the country. And this isn't provincial, but my property taxes too are disgusting. And now they want to build all these bike lanes. I had this guy come up to me. He's like, do you even bike? It's like, dude, I pay property taxes. Who are you to determine where those taxes go to? Where do you think the city's getting the money by increasing my property taxes? If you knew what I paid in property taxes, you'd be disgusted. So, I mean, again, I could go into an absolute flurry or rage on insurance. But instead of doing that, I'll let you talk about Canadians who might have been in a bit of a rage there, Alex, because we saw hundreds, if not like 1,000, show up to this protest outside a courthouse, I think. Yeah, what was going on there, Alex?
Yeah, so this was outside of the Robert S.K. Welch Courthouse in St. Catharines, Ontario. Actually looks like a pretty nice little town, based off of the footage that we have from our friend of the show, Kareem Assad. And tons of people showed up. I said it was hundreds. Some people estimate that may have even been more than hundreds. They were protesting. A lot of them were there under the assumption that it was a bail hearing for a gentleman named Daniel Senecal, or as he likes to go by, Danny Senecal, apparently. There's some rumors going around that this individual identifies as a woman, presumably with a penis. I know that doesn't make sense, but whatever, I'm just the reporter.
To some, it makes sense, Alex. Yeah. Can we actually just run that clip quick before we get...
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Just run that clip? Just one thing I wanted to say quick, Alex. While that clip was running, I just looked up the population of St. Catharines, 140,000. So a pretty small town or whatever it is. For that many people to show up, I'm certainly some people came, even maybe from out of town. Yeah.
Willie, you're making an expression like you know something about St. Catharines that we should know about.
I mean, I was just in defense of our viewers from St. Catharines in Ontario. I mean, whether it's a city or a town, I think it's a beautiful town. Just what surprises me from the video was the fact that I'm looking at the proportion of people there. So I think the majority of people are actually from the local community. I'm also interested by the demographics there. It looks like a lot of older folks with some youth. So there's a mix of age there for sure. So that's, I think, a very important part because, we heard from Pierre Poilievre talk about jail not bail. I'll let Alex start the conversation here for this story. But I know that the more people showing up for this kind of protest event, the more you understand just how chronic the failure of the justice system is these days. So, but St. Catharines is a beautiful town, or you could say a small city. I think it has its own city hall and its own mayor. So I think you can safe to say it's a small city in Ontario.
Yeah, it's an amazing turnout. I think that, I'm obviously not a mind reader. I don't know exactly what was in these people's hearts, but I think that most of them were there because they are fed up with our criminal justice system. Just a little bit more background. This individual who was having their courtroom appearance, and I attended the appearance remotely, he was previously charged with sexual assault offenses back in 2021, I believe, is his first offense. The details of that case are covered by a publication ban to protect the identity of the victim. He was let out early and also added to the registered sex offender list, which in Canada is not on public record. So I don't really understand why we have this list other than to perhaps help police more closely monitor individuals who are higher risk to the public. I personally think that, maybe we should have some sunshine law reforms and that those lists should be public so that people have a better capability of protecting themselves and their family from potential predators. In any case, this was not a bail hearing. It was what they call a remand video conferencing appearance. I don't believe he actually has had a formal bail hearing. I think that we'll be getting close to something approximating a formal bail hearing probably in November. The wheels of justice grind slowly. In any case, Senecal is still in custody, but there is a lot of rumors going around that he wants to be put into a female prison, which just stokes more outrage. I should also add, of course, I don't want to get too detailed into the crime that he committed most recently, but the allegation is that he violently assaulted a child. And so I think it's really, really amazing and great that so many people showed up in defense of that child because, as we all know, children are not really capable of defending themselves. So that's where, good law-abiding citizens who care about the vulnerable come out and do their best to affect change. And I should also know that in Canada, we do not have elected judges, and our lawmakers have only spent 20 days in the House of Commons this year. So when people want to affect change, really protest is their only option at this point. So I'm really glad that they were there, and I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, and Alex, obviously, we know Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has said numerous times, I think, that biological women should be in women's prisons and biological men should be in men's prisons. But if I recall correctly, Alex, it was actually you who asked Carney about his thoughts on that. And what just remind me again, what he had to say there, Alex?
Well, he said that there were two biological sexes, and he had, I think correctly, to some extent, he drew a distinction between gender and sex. But I asked, if there are two biological sexes, do you believe that biological women are entitled to their own spaces, including prisons? And he said, as a general objective, yes. Unfortunately, we've seen zero movement on whether or not those reforms are going to take place.
Yeah, as a general objective, yes, except that's not how the law is in Canada, and I haven't changed it. So really, how do you really feel? Because if you were passionate about this, I'm sure it would be changed. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say about that. It's a great, like you said, Alex, that was a great point there, that the House of Commons has sat for 20 days, and obviously we can't change the laws. I mean, we have so many examples of laws people are calling to be changed, Elections Canada laws, all types of voting laws, all types of laws that affect us nationwide, but it can't be done if Parliament isn't sitting. So we'll have to see what happens when the House of Commons resumes here very, very briefly, or very shortly. Sorry, not briefly. But anyways, I'm Isaac Lamoureux. I'd like to thank my colleagues Alex Zoltan and Walid Tamtam for today's show. And remember, everything you heard today was off the record.
Yes.
As you mentioned, sorry, Walid, you go just quickly here. You mentioned the registered sex offenders lists, and I'm just wondering whether you know this, you may not, but in other countries that have these lists, like the US, for example, do I think it would be a bit too obtrusive if they had the people's addresses on there because they might be getting attacked. But like if a registered sex offender moved into your neighborhood and was your next door neighbor, like would they have to by law tell you? Is that a thing?
It varies depending on where you are. I don't think that by law there's anywhere where they would have to give you a public notice, to the best of my knowledge, but there are registered sex offenders lists where, you know, they will post the person's address. And I know that because there's a website called Inmates Connects Canada, where different Canadian prisoners, you know, you can find like pen pals and stuff. And one of them was in the States. And the only way I was able to find any information on their crimes was because they were on the registered sex offender list, and it lists their address and yada, yada, yada. So
I was just curious because, you know, you never know, a sex offender moves onto your block. It'd be nice to know if you have children, right? Like realistically.
yeah, of course.
Especially in Canada when we can't lock them up. I mean, they're just walking around.
Right? I mean, it's the worst of both worlds. I mean, I totally get the idea behind wanting to have a legal system that believes that people have issues that are remediable. But if you're going to have that, then you should also, you know, balance public safety by telling society that you're releasing a bunch of prisoners into their neighborhoods. You know,
yeah, the only things I see around here are, hey, sorry, we're releasing this murderer or this very dangerous individual. We can't keep them in prison. We're releasing them. This person is a public danger and they're being released. I mean, you see it so often.